A little bit of a response here to the most recent video I put up on culture itself as a kind of religion. And I was really talking about the way that language relates to time binding. And I'm going to respond here first to both Zarkov and then Do in the Morning. Zarkov 45, this is what he writes. It's videos like this that sometimes make me think that the goal of philosophers is to destroy the intelligibility of language. Religion is what it is. It's not what it's like. So you can use the term religion metaphorically and mean a metaphor can mean, but when the crunch time comes, you've got to own up to it being a metaphor. Okay, that's what he says. And then, which I'm going to get to that in a second, but then Do in the Morning writes, which I think I understand a little bit more. She says, first, let's establish a proper definition of religion, then label language, culture, or atheism religious. And I put to her, I just posted this comment, I wanted to follow up on that, is that I basically disagree. And that I think, and this is to Zarkov's comment as well, we need to begin, and this is, I would say, a challenge to all of us here, to anyone here, you're watching this video, this is a challenge to you. What is the proper definition of language? How does language relate to time? How does language relate to objects? What exactly are we going to say about the nature of language? I mean, what is it about language that is, I guess, an impetus toward transcendence, an experience of time in a different way than other organisms experience time? See, I think Korzybski was a scientist, as much of a scientist as we can imagine a scientist would be, and yet he resisted at all points to the expression that humans are animals. He refused that definition only because he thought that we needed to understand the unique time binding capacities of this organism that we know, that we call the human. When we say humans are animals, we categorically level humans into just space binding organisms in the way that other animals are. But I think for Korzybski, he in no way wanted to suggest some sort of super phantasmical something, but he did want to recognize that language itself poses significant problems for those who try to deal with the person or the human being too atomistically. So, what is language? At the very least, we have to admit that language allows us to talk about what isn't the case. Yeah. You take anything, I have this stapler here. I can say an infinity of true statements about this stapler right here. I can say that this stapler is not a an enchilada. I can say that this stapler is not a bus on its way to Detroit. I can say that this stapler does not weigh 5,000 pounds. All of those are true, and yet it's language that allows us to speak truths of what isn't. And that is a real part of human everyday experiences. Language, see, I think this is the problem with Do in the Morning's argument, is that to say that what we need to do is first define religion and then define language or culture or religion, or I'm sorry, and then label language, culture, or atheism as religious, it's odd because we're beginning with the problem of definition, and yet if we haven't defined what language is, I don't know if we can actually do that. Right? And I think the problem of language is that one of the aspects of language is the ability to give definitions, but language is more than just the capacity to make references and to use it sort of instrumentally. We can do this kind of instrumentalism of language as if language is an occasional tool that some person uses to convey thoughts to another person in an intentional manner. We can do that, but that is in no way an exhaustive definition of language. Language has to do with what makes a person ethically responsible. That is, a person who does not learn the language. If we say a person cannot be taught the language and they don't acquire language, if you're a parent and your child does not learn the language and they don't learn to speak and respond to speak, you are very concerned, and the law will not hold that person responsible in the same way. Now, they may be, if they do certain acts, they may be subject to certain kinds of punishments, but the understanding of, does this person have the ability to know the difference between right and wrong? I think so much of the early biblical stories, they were about, particularly, the story about the tree in the Garden of Eden, it's about the acquisition of language. The acquisition of language is the mother of all things. It's what makes discerning, discrete, possible choices of right and wrong possible. Right? I think that it's not that there were religious practices and then language emerged out of it. It's that language itself is the original transcendence. It's the beginning of a time-binding culture, which is a bid for more than, going the way of the nameless, faceless death. And from there, it got distilled and politicized into these institutional religious organizations that we know as organized religion, and these have power, but it is the original transcendence of language. It's the space and time, the room-making nothingness that language is, that makes for the religious mind. It's because people speak that there are many different religions around the world. It's not that religion is this contagion that, I guess, infects language. It's that language itself is a kind of spiritual transcendence. When I say, too, I want to get at this. When I say language is a room-making nothingness, and I've said this in so many videos, I have so much stuff on this, I'm almost blue in the face trying to explain what this is. Here's the simplest way for me to explain it. Go somewhere and sit in a public place where people are speaking a foreign language and you don't know that foreign language. When you hear a person and they're just chattering a language that you don't know, it just sounds like a bunch of noises. All you can hear are the noises in that space and time, like they're just right there in the environment. But when you know those words, the noises disappear. They like negate themselves as noises, and you somehow dwell along in the thought or the meaning or the sense of those words. That is, you can't hear the noisiness of your own tongue in the way that you can hear it of a foreign tongue. And so when I say that there's a room-making nothingness, I mean that the noisiness of our own speech negates itself as noisy. It disappears for the sake of a kind of thought or meaning or sense that we dwell along in time. We dwell in the sense that has been made room for as the noisiness disappears. I don't know what else to say, how much clearer I need to be to make this issue of, there is a kind of room-making nothingness that is a trans-historical phenomenon. None of us have made up the language that we speak, and in fact, the language that you're using is very likely, if not definitely, the oldest thing you've come into contact with today. It's ancient. The words you're using are ancient. You're participating in a multi-generational project of which, I've called it in this book that I have coming out, it's called the Kazasui Project. It's the project that nature beset to itself with the ability to make promises and the capacity to be of its own making. And it's not in any way am I talking about life after death, divine intervention, no doer of deeds, no creator behind, nothing like that. The point is that nature itself somehow made room for a being, an organism that could bind time, and that time binding created a kind of consciousness, a kind of self-aware existence of a person that includes moral decision making and choice, and an experience of gratitude, an experience of relation to the larger world, that without language, I don't know if you can feel those things. I don't know if other animals experience the same degree of morality and choice, but I don't think they experience the same degree of guilt. I don't think they experience the same degree of gratitude and of beauty and wonder. I think they certainly do experience higher mammals, perhaps some range of that. But if we want to get at language, I think we're asking, what does it mean to be human? And certainly part of what it means to be human is to have the capacity to be religious. Not that people who are necessarily, but to imagine that religion is just something that you're going to corral. I think it's to miss how much it's in the very fabric of language itself. Okay, thanks.